This is a super simple subtitles add-on I've been developing for Godot 3.4. Just a heads up, I have a lot of background story and information coming up. If you want to skip all that, feel free to jump to the appropriate chapter in the video. Recently I entered the Godot Wild Jam, a lovely game jam specifically for games made with Godot. I actually wasn't planning on participating at first, but once I saw that the theme was ocean, I joined in late just to try something new. I'd wanted to make a Subnautica clone for a while. I do not have the experience, expertise, or know-how to make something that is exactly like Subnautica. However, my favorite way to learn is by trying new things that I don't think I'm capable of and seeing what works. My submission, out of all 91 entries, was ranked 80th, which isn't great, but while making the game I learned a lot and found inspiration for new projects, which is arguably more valuable than winning a jam. Some of the interesting systems I worked on for this jam game was context-based steering, automated serialization, graphic settings, and general level design practice. Simply put, context-based steering is the process of treating a digital entity like a real-world robot. They have a series of sensors that detect information with a limitation on how much they can sense, and then they steer their body using that sensor data. What's really fun about using context-based steering is you don't need to bake any navigation maps, because each entity will react to whatever sensor data they receive. I set this up with a somewhat conic series of raycasts going in front of the fish, and the whole code system was very janky. A lot of things were hard-coded when they shouldn't have been, but for a game jam, it's just fine. This design was appearing to be fairly simple. The raycasts detect physics objects, the fish swim away from the physics object, and they just need a general direction to go towards, and they'll avoid any obstacles in their path, right? This system took me 4 whole days to get working properly. On top of everything else I have to do, besides the game that I was working on in the middle of the work week. I'm proud of how it turned out, but it was an enormous time sink, and it was time that probably could have been devoted to making the game more fun to play. Another system I worked on, which doesn't necessarily have the nicest graphics to look at for it, is automated serialization. I wanted to make it so that saving the data for the game was really easy, both for the players and for me as a developer, because I don't like needing to deal with it. Because I was making a Subnautica clone, I had to track every resource object in the map and know whether or not it had been destroyed yet. I also needed to save the player's inventory and several other data objects. It was a huge hassle to get working nicely, but it should be seamless for the players. For me, graphic settings are one of those things that aren't always expected from game jams, but it gives the appearance of having time and budget. So I really wanted to figure out some graphic settings for my game. I was able to set up a script that queued several data values that would propagate into the world environment node in the game world. I let the players choose the screen space reflection settings, screen space ambient occlusion settings, as well as the tone mapper settings, just to name a few. This, as well as the serialization process, really helps me learn the set and get functions that all nodes have. I never had a chance to really learn what they did, but I learned how powerful they are because with a string representation of any property, I can assign the value or I can collect the value and store it somewhere else. And the string itself is easily serialized compared to a more cohesive property path. It should be a bit obvious by now, but there were a lot of extra things that I worked on for this project, and they were not terribly helpful to the actual game that was being played. None of the things I've listed here are actually the game. They're almost just parts of what makes most games a game. This project I submitted about an hour before the deadline, and I was still working on the winning conditions about 3 hours before then. I'd almost argue this project was a disaster. Another large contributor to how low of a ranking I earned was that I didn't actually look at the categories for rankings. I usually compete in ludum dare, so I assumed that the parameters were the same. But after looking into it, I realized that there are extra criteria that the Godot Wildjam adds that encourage developers to think about how to make even better games. For the Godot Wildjam, accessibility is an entire ranking criteria. They even reference official documentation on common and easy systems that can be implemented to provide better accessibility. I never even considered this, and it's something crucial for people to actually be able to play my games. The horrendous example from Mini Nautilus is that the Leviathan creature, which I named Lieutenant Flubbernubs, had audio cues for when he detected the player and when he stopped chasing the player. He also made periodic ambient noises for the player to determine his position as they swim around. Everything you needed to know exactly how much danger you were in at any given moment was entirely based on audio cues. Another important moment for me that influenced my projects now is what I did after the jam. I decided to relax and see what certain YouTubers were playing, and so I watched Markiplier and Jacksepticeye playing the latest Five Nights at Freddy's game. That one. I saw tons of elements, not just from my game, but also from Security Breach, that were just unfinished or completely missing. I saw several instances from Security Breach where the subtitles broke.
Noticed my handsomeness. That's not what you said.
And there were also some other slightly famous problems with the game. I was seeing all these different examples all at once, and I realized, why can't I just make a library of systems that are central to making games? These systems are basically going into every game I ever make. I specifically like to make short 3D games, and a lot of the functionalities are the same across each game. If I just had a library, a collection of code and resources that did the central things that I wanted in any of my games, I could actually focus more of my time on making the game instead of making the boilerplate. And this sounds a bit ridiculous to have such a revelation on, but I've spent years coming to this revelation. So now that I've gotten all that background talk out of the way, I can actually talk about the subtitles I demoed at the beginning of this video. Might have taken a bit of a while. The subtitles work as an add-on. My goal was to make it so that adding the subtitles to an already completed game was easy. So my primary focus was on supporting games made in Godot that use the built-in audio stream player nodes, and I needed it to support it in a way that didn't mess with any existing scene structures. My solution was to create a script as a node that could be added as a child to any audio stream player. It detects when the audio stream is played, and it pushes the appropriate data into the subtitling system. The subtitling system is based on an auto-loaded script, which is enabled when the plugin is enabled. It adds canvas layers to the game and displays control nodes on those layers. It does some pretty fun math under the hood to determine how much the camera is looking at the sound source and where to position the subtitle if the sound source is not currently visible. Because of the way I designed this, once you've activated the plugin, it all works automatically. All you have to do is add the nodes to the appropriate sound players and set up the keys. Considering that I also wanted to support games that are already done, I wanted to figure out how to let users add a lot of these subtitle data nodes onto their audio stream players. They might have 10 or even 20 different players in one scene, and it'd be very tedious to go through and add each one by hand. So I made a tool script that allows you to click a button and it searches through and finds all of the audio stream players in the scene and adds a subtitle data node as a child. And I would assume if you have 20 some audio stream player nodes, they would be named in some logical way. And so the subtitle key is assigned to whatever the audio stream player's name is in the scene tree. For a touch of extensibility, something I'm very proud of about this is that because this subtitle system works by adding a node as a child to an audio stream player, it'll also work with any nodes that extend from an audio stream player. So any stream players that are added from another add-on or customized specifically for your game will just work with the subtitle system. And now that I've talked up this project a little bit, I can set the expectations back down again. This add-on is currently in heavy development. I've already stripped the entire system down to the ground once before to make this level of quality. I don't want to remake it from nothing ever again, but if it will allow the system to be better, I'm willing to do that. Because of that inherent instability, I don't have a real release for this add-on, not yet. There's a public GitHub repository, which is under the MIT license, so anyone should be able to use it without any licensing issues. However, it's not yet a feature-complete add-on. I only have coded the support for 3D spatial subtitles. I still need to work out the systems for 2D and non-spatial subtitles, like for character dialogue. I'm trying to work these out from most to least difficult, so I expect I'll be working on the non-spatial next, since I'll need to figure out a proper stacking system for the dialogues. The 2D space is pretty low on my priority, not just because it'll be easy, but also because I'm working on 3D games mainly. If you really like this add-on and you need it to work on a 2D game, looking at the code I already have, it should be fairly easy to make a 2D version. If that all works well, I'd even be willing to take a pull request if you make something that looks good. And now I've got a fun little call to action for you, but it's not what you'd expect. I recently made a proposal for the Godot engine, requesting that audio stream players have a signal for when they start to play. At the moment, they only have a signal for when they're finished, not when they start. And for the subtitling system, it is more important to know when the audio has started, not when it stopped. Right now, my subtitle data node uses the process function to check every single frame if the player started playing. It caches what happened last frame and checks that it wasn't playing last frame and is playing this frame, and uses that information to determine if it just started. The problem with this is that means that for every audio stream player that needs subtitle data, there will be a node on it drawing resources to call the process function, to cache the data, into a variable in memory just to know whether or not it is time to add a subtitle. If the proposal gets accepted, I can convert this to be more event-driven. And that way, the overhead will only ever be having too many subtitles all at once. And that's not something I'm ready to solve quite yet. Theoretically, it won't be an issue for most games. But that's a bridge I'll go down later once we're feature complete. Thank you for watching. This is my first professional looking development log video. I wanted to start getting more information out there about my projects so people can get excited about what I'm working on. And since if you're watching this, you're probably a fellow game developer, I've got some resources and links down in the description. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know if there's something better I could do for these videos, or if there's something you particularly liked. I'm very new to putting effort into these videos, and I'd appreciate any support you can give.